Political correspondent Melissa Clark joins us now from Canberra. And Melissa, why has the government, if it does in fact make this announcement, why has it chosen to bring troops home a year earlier?
Well, what we have is Julia Gillard getting prepared ahead of a NATO meeting in Chicago mid-May. And that's where we're going to see international forces in Afghanistan really start to lock down the withdrawal of international troops from various provinces. Now, we know we've heard plenty of times from not only the Australian government, but from the Afghan government and other nations involved in Afghanistan saying it is going to be a gradual process, a transitional process. It will differ from region to region. But we know in the Oruzgan region, where Australian troops are primarily focused and where most of Australia's 1,550 troops are, they believe that things are better than had been anticipated and the mentoring task is going successfully. So we are expecting Julia Gillard to make an announcement that they will begin to start bringing troops home sometime this year. And if we take that 12 to 18-month transition phase that was anticipated, that could mean most of those troops are home by the end of next year, a good year in advance of that end of 2014 deadline that had previously been marked out by international forces.
And this is still reliant on support from the Afghan government, isn't it?
This is where it obviously gets a bit more complicated because it's not just a matter of international for troops and the ISAF deciding when NATO meets in Chicago. There's also, of course, how things are on the ground in Afghanistan and how administration there views the transition. Now, the Australian government is also waiting for the Afghan President Hamid Karzai to declare that he's confident that the Afghan National Army and local forces in Oruzgan province are ready to take control, and they're expecting that sometime in the next few months. So there's also that element. But the Defence Minister Stephen Smith has just come back from a trip that included stopping over in Afghanistan, and he made it very clear that although Australia has a long-term interest and will have a long-term presence in Afghanistan with special forces staying on in the long term and extra assistance for institutions, he says things are very much changing now. Instead of being focused on security, they're focused on delivering services to the Afghan people. And this is what he told Four Corners last night.
Where we find Afghanistan at its worst are the delivery of services and the provision of basic facilities to their people. And when I met with the Governor and the Deputy Governor of Oruzgan Province, the Police Chief, the Director of the National Directorate of Security and the Army Commander of the 4th Brigade, to a man, they all said the most important thing now are not security issues, the most important things now are developing and providing the services.
The Defence Minister Stephen Smith speaking on Four Corners last night. Now, Melissa, how is this likely to play out politically at home?
Well, what it would mean if that deadline that we anticipate is brought forward, we see troops being brought home in 12 to 18 months beginning sometime this year, it would mean a fair chunk of the Australian troops over there would be home, if not the majority be home, by the time the 2013 election rolls around. But what we have with Afghanistan is, from the government and the opposition, a bipartisan approach to Afghanistan. The opposition has been supportive of all of the moves the government has made in its approach to this issue, so we wouldn't expect it to be played out as a political issue between the major parties at any election. However, it does help the Labor Party if more troops were home and Australia's involvement in Afghanistan were less by the time the election came around, because the polls consistently show that a majority of Australians don't want troops in Afghanistan, and it's also an area where the Greens have been successfully pushing a different point of view, calling for troops to be brought home as well. So whilst primarily not a political issue, if we are seeing this drawdown of troops being finished or near being finished by the time of the next election, then inevitably that would feed into an election campaign.
Melissa Clark in Canberra, thank you.